Our nutrition expert, Roxanne Vogel, is back on the show, Fatty, talking supplements. You know, those well-established ones like protein, creatine, caffeine, all that good stuff. But Fatty and I would like to add one more supplement to her list.
Yep, that's right. We want to add CBD to that list. Compared to what you're going to hear Roxanne talk about in this show, CBD is kind of the new kid on the block, and that might give some Leadville racers reason to pause or avoid it. But Hadi and I, through our sponsorship with Floyd's of Leadville, have been testing the merits of CBD for months.
That's right. And like most supplements, you know, CBD's no magic pill. Just like anything, you got to put in the work, treat your body right, not count on one thing to get you that big buckle. But what we can say that is that Floyd's of Leadville products, all of which contain some amounts of CBD, deliver on their promise to help you relax and recover. R&R, certainly one of the main ingredients to getting you back to 6th and Harrison.
Yeah, that's right. So be sure to check out Floyd's of Leadville, our presenting sponsor, at floydsofleadville.com, and be sure to use that code FATTY at checkout for a 15% discount on your first 2 orders.
And thanks, Floyd's of Leadville, for sponsoring the show.
3, 2,
1. Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race presented by Floyd's of Leadville, Season 2, Episode 13 of the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest and hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country.
Hadi, I want to follow up on an idea we recently talked about on this show. Getting friends of the podcast together a couple of times during the week before the big race for a couple of rides and maybe a live Q&A recording. Honestly, I thought we might have a few people show some interest. Maybe 10 or so of us would get together for a ride and then crowd into someone's Airbnb and pass around a mic for a Q&A recorded podcast.
Yeah, it's kind of worked out to be something bigger than that altogether. The poll we put up, it was great. It was on Facebook. We had more than 50 of you saying you want to come ride and or record a show with us. And then the Leadville Race Series retail store contacted us and said they'd love to have us come record the show at their place.
Yeah, we've got a place. And all of our sponsors also reached out and said they would be happy to send us some giveaways for the folks who come and ride and talk with us. All of which is to say, this thing is on. We'll be recording a Q&A show at the Leadville Race Series store on Wednesday, August 7th. You know, that's a Wednesday before the race at 7 p.m.
Mm-hmm. We haven't quite got tickets arranged yet, but we're going to do that, and we'll tell you how to get a ticket once we know ourselves. We do know that the space will be limited to around 50 people, so sorry about that capacity number. And we'll be giving away some awesome stuff as well. And we'll also be bringing in some very smart, knowledgeable Leadville experts to answer your questions, along with a lot of giveaways from our sponsors.
Yep, and it'll give you a great chance to ask the questions you've got on your mind a couple of days before the race. In addition to that recording, we'll probably do a group ride on Columbine, maybe on Tuesday, the day before the recording, August 6th, and then maybe do a no-drop, super slow group Kevens plus Boulevard pre-ride on Thursday, August 8th. The times and gathering spots are TBD on both of those, but that's kind of what is on our mind right now. Bear with us. We are not used to arranging this kind of thing. We're used to sitting and talking, not actually accomplishing stuff and making things happen.
Yeah. We're just podcasters. We're not event promoters. We have no clue. But Fatty, well, what about the cost now? How much is this going to cost, folks?
Oh, so much money. No charge. We are just looking to build up some good Leadville 100 karma and hoping it'll come back to us and to you on race day.
So, folks, start thinking about riding and recording with us as you make your Leadville travel plans. We're looking forward to talking to you and riding with you as well.
Hadi, you know, about 15 years ago, a fledgling little company called Banjo Brothers reached out to a fledgling blogger called Fat Cyclist, me, and became my first longest running sponsor. They have literally been with me since the beginning of my blogging and now podcasting career. And you know what the first thing they ever sent me was?
I don't know. What's up? What was it?
They sent me their deluxe mini seat bag, which I put on my Ibis Thai road bike, RAP, that bike, which was expertly outfitted with fenders because I lived in Seattle at the time, so I could bike commute to Microsoft in Redmond, Washington. That bag never failed me, and believe it or not, I still have and use it 15 years later.
Well, that is some impressive durability.
Yeah. Here's the thing with that. I am going to use that 15-year-old mini saddlebag as my Leadville 100 saddlebag this year.
Well, I'd be super impressed if you were using that Ibis Thai road bike as well. But man, you're going to use that mini saddlebag as well. I have one of those, and they are great. Now, mine's not 15 years old, but they're great for taking care of a flat on your road bike. But I don't see what good it'll do you on a mountain bike, considering its size.
Yeah. It's a tiny little seat bag, and so you'd be right. But get this, I'm able to easily hold a 20-gram CO2 cartridge, a lever, a Tubolito S-Tubo tube in that mini pack. And I mean easily, these Tubolito tubes, and you have to look it up, tubolito.com. They are super light, they're thin, and the stem actually screws off. So these things take no room at all. They're pretty tough. And I like to keep things super minimal during the race. It all fits in this mini seat pack by Banjo Brothers.
Yeah, in a long day like Leadville, reducing weight any way you can, whether it be the size of your seat bag or the size of your or thickness of your tube, is a great idea. Nice combination of old and new there, Fatty. You can get 15% off your Banjo Brothers order, including that deluxe mini seat bag, Ibis Thai bike not included, which is only $15 in the first place by going to banjobrothers.com/fatty-favorites. Banjo Brothers is tough, practical, and affordable. They are based in Minneapolis, in business since 2003, as Fatty can tell you, and they're just good guys. Get 15% off your order. Go to banjobrothers.com/fatty-favorites.
Howdy, you've been riding for a couple of decades, right? How long have you been riding?
God damn, I guess you're right. I mean, if we're talking just about the years where I had to buy my own bikes, not my parents buying them, then yeah, easily since the mid-90s I've been riding bikes.
Yeah. Did you have a bike computer on those bikes in the old, in the 90s?
In the 90s, no, I probably used, the sun to figure out how long I'd been out.
You just sort of line up a what are those called?
Sundial?
Sundial. Thank you. You line up a sundial and just make sure that you're going the correct direction. Anyway, I think that the bike computers were about that sophisticated, lining up the sensor and the magnet. And then, you had to compute the circumference of the wheel and routing the finicky cable around your fork. And then, of course, the magnet sort of turns out of alignment and you start getting that terrible, that clicking sound, click, 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 click. I swear, polar. It seems like the Ice Age.
Yeah. I think I did my first Leadville with a cat eye adventure that I still have in my garage, but I remember the same thing. It was a tiny little screen. There was a wire going down my suspension fork and a magnet and the whole bit. And I think I looked at the device maybe twice during my 106 miles around the Leadville Trail 100.
Yeah. That all sort of changed when we got the GPS bike computers, and it really took off. I remember it was with the Garmin Edge 500. I reviewed that in my blog, and people just really reacted. People were like, "Oh wow, a GPS can do this, and it's only that small."
Yeah,
it was pretty amazing.
I still have a 500 sitting out in my collection of Garmins, and I've pulled it out on occasion when I just don't want to go full fledged. But both you and I are now riding the deluxe Garmin 1030, which has this big color touch screen and almost unlimited capabilities. It has so many features, in fact, that it would be easy to completely be unaware of ways your bike computer might help you be faster or at least have a better day. And at the Leadville 100, that's darn important.
Kenny, thanks so much for joining us at the Leadville podcast. How are you doing, man?
Doing really good. Thanks for having me.
Now, you have never done the Leadville 100, but you have done what Hottie and I agree is the coolest sounding race that we've ever heard of, the Cool Hand Luke Gravel Grinder in Leavenworth.
Yeah, it's actually my first century I ever did on kind of the wrong bike and everything, and somehow I survived. And then I've gone back to it every year. I think this will be my 6th year this year doing that race.
Okay. So you do understand obsession and doing the same race over and over, which Hottie and I, of course, have some familiarity with. So for your day job, of course, you are the senior team leader in the fitness software engineering group at Garmin. We want to talk about how folks can use their GPSs to hit their goals, both in training and at races, in especially the Leadville 100. Of course, with GPSs and Strava tying them together nowadays, you can really get a ton of data both after and during the race itself. So how do you generally set up your Garmin so that you can hit splits and know what you are doing while you're racing?
I mean, the first thing I would start with that is available on all of our Garmin Edge devices is going to be, creating a course or a route of the race. And that's going to, kind of give you what your upcoming elevation is going to be for the race, as well as how far you have left to go. You can use the map really well with that to understand what direction you're heading, so you can kind of prepare for headwinds, crosswinds, tailwinds, and kind of position yourself accordingly. If you happen to be in a group, right, and drafting, or just kind of prepare yourself mentally for, okay, I've got 5 miles of headwind, just got to do it, right? So that's where I would start, and Strava has great tools for creating routes on their website, as well as we do on Garmin Connect at connect.garmin.com, and we actually just have spent some time revamping a lot of that, and you can go in, and click around on the map and create the course for a race, and send it to your Garmin Edge, and they go from there.
Now, Kenny, every time I've raced Leadville, and I'd imagine you've done this too, I have taped my split times on my top tube, and I would do that again. I mean, I think having good old analog paper written down is kind of a fail-safe. I mean, you kind of want that little backup plan in case something goes wrong. What if you lose your Garmin? Who knows what happens? So it's always good to have things on paper, but I know that there's a way also to create splits within your GPS device. And I think the first time I did it, I set up a workout, actually. How can it be done now with the current models of Garmin's that are out there?
So for that particular use case, I typically use what we call our lap summary data screen. And you set that up, and then we have a dedicated lap button. You can also think of it as an interval button on every one of our devices. And you can set that up so you get to either you can have it automatically create a split for you every hour or every 10 miles if you want. It's kind of whatever you want to do, or you can just manually do it if it makes more sense to be lapping when you get to your first sag checkpoint and then your second sag checkpoint, and you can kind of compare either average speed or all the other different metrics that we record on computers. Let
me follow up then.
Yeah.
If I know how much time it's going to take me to get from segment to segment, and those times vary, can I set up timers that can be triggered by the user so I can maybe get a countdown as to whether or not I'm on time to meet my next checkpoint?
So the feature we do have with our courses is called a virtual partner that's just speed-based, and that would be for the entire course. You could set like an average speed that's going to get you to a completion time that you expect to be able to do, and then you can tell if you're ahead or behind and by how much of that virtual partner. There's not really any way right now to kind of split that up and say I'm on pace to the first checkpoint, other than just kind of knowing what that ought to be and if you're ahead behind your pace that you planned.
Now, can you use live segments to accomplish some of what Hottie's talking about? I know that there's Strava live segments that let you see how you're doing on a particular segment. If there is like a segment that goes from the starting line to the pipeline aid station, for example. Is there a way that you can see how you're doing on that?
Yes, actually, that was something else I had on my list here to recommend. You can use segments because a lot of times there's segments of the key climbs, in a race, or the key kind of flat sections. And you can, if you star those on Strava and you create a route on Strava, and then sync all that to your Garmin, those will pop up while you're following that route or that course, and allow you to kind of get a smaller section tracking for, how much distance you have left or how much more elevation you have to climb.
And something that we can do in our show notes is there is a Leadville course defined in Strava, as well as some sort of commonly achieved times. There are people who want to hit 12 hours. There are people who want to hit 9 hours and 8 hours and so forth. And we'll add some links to those in the show notes so people can find them and start using those. And probably worth noting is on Strava, there are, I don't even know how many dozens, if not hundreds, of segments that have been defined that are really specific to the Leadville course. So you can star those, mark those, and bring them into your Garmin so that you can see how you are doing for each of those during the event. Now, you don't need to have your phone with you when you're doing those segments, right? It's not required to have some sort of data connection or anything like that.
Yes, that is correct. You would just need to have synced all that beforehand to get it onto your device, and then you should be all set to go on race day. So.
All right. Something worth noting, just for people like myself who get all excited about these kinds of these tools, is you don't want to try them like on the first day, or you don't want to try them on race day for the first time, I guess is the way I want to say it. Make sure that you practice on a segment that you're really familiar with, because it's something that is pretty easy to set up, but it does take a little bit of practice to get comfortable with triggering them and knowing how they work, right?
Yes, I would certainly recommend, getting in a long training ride, which you're probably going to have to be doing anyway to be prepared for that sort of an event. And just take it through as if it was a race, and kind of do the upfront prep, and then get that onto your device and work out any kinks through that experience.
Kenny, my partner Fatty there loves to say that Leadville is a eating and drinking competition disguised as a bike race. In other words, you got to eat and drink, and you better keep on time with that. Can my Garmin help me with eating and drinking?
Yes, starting with our Edge 1030, we do have eat and drink alerts, and so I will set those up just to be a friendly reminder, every 30 or every 15 minutes, take a drink. Every 30 minutes, eat something. And so those are always very helpful kind of reinforcements to keep the flow of hydration and nutrition coming.
Yeah, I will say that I got a 1030 late last year, and up until the 1030, and I don't know when this was added, but upgrading from my old Garmin, where I had a single timer, being able to do multiple timers is super useful. So you can have a timer that goes off at a certain distance. You can add your own timers. You can have a drink timer. You can have an eat timer. And it is really useful to be able to set things so that you can kind of just focus on your riding and have your bike computer tell you what to do. And that way you don't find yourself suddenly bonking at mile 40 because you've forgotten to drink and eat for a while.
The race, of course, is very long. It's 12 hours for a lot of people out there. What should they expect from the life of their Garmin, especially the current models? Will it make it the full distance? I know you guys have battery attachments that can go on some of these units. What should we be thinking there as far as battery life?
For an event of that length, Edge 1030 is going to cover all your needs. We definitely have proven that out through actual usage. I think I tested it out very thoroughly on DK200 a couple years ago, and we spent a lot of time making sure that we're going to be able to cover those events without any sort of supplemental charging. I would, if you're worried about it, you can charge the units with an external battery pack. Either just kind of aftermarket, or we do make a specific Garmin charge accessory. And with the 1030, it actually just plugs straight into the bottom of the mount and charges the unit as you're going. And so that's also very nice for any sort of multi-day type events that people may be doing. And then for our older units that don't have the the integration to just connect the battery pack straight to the edge itself. Excuse me. You do have a USB connector, so you can just use that as your external battery pack and plug it into any of our older models to charge them during an event.
Yeah, and I've wondered before, and haven't really tried it out with the 1030, but with other GPSs that I've had, if you are connected to your heart rate monitor, perhaps to a cadence sensor, or maybe to a power sensor, maybe to your phone, for every device that you are connecting to via Bluetooth, are you reducing the amount of time that your GPS is going to be able to run because it's pinging or talking to these other sensors as well?
Really, we'll see a kind of incremental change in how much battery we're draining per kind of technology you enable. So if you have ANT sensors, having one and then adding, is the biggest jump, and then adding a few more is going to be pretty negligible. Same thing, if your phone's connected or not connected, makes a difference. But we certainly consider those in our normal use case for these events and put a lot of time into that on the newer products to ensure that you can have all that stuff going as you would expect and still cover a 20 hours worth of battery life.
Ultimately, it's screen display time, Fatty. I mean, that's the thing that will suck battery life. And if you're thinking about a long time with your Garmin, one of the best things you can do is allow it to go into sleep mode or make sure it's dimming properly. That will all extend your battery life. Another thing about Garmin and any GPS device, of course, Kenny, is a lot of people consider these an investment. I mean, they're as much as a moderately priced set of wheels, and we'd like to protect these things. So how can we make sure that the thing stays on, and if we do crash and things go flying everywhere, that somehow we can hold on to our beloved Garmin device?
I'll get to that. All of our devices come with a tether. If you're really worried about it, you can kind of loop that into the bottom of the unit and loop it around your handlebars. And that way, if it does come off the mount, it's still going to be attached to your bike and probably didn't, smash into a rock or something. That's especially useful in mountain biking, where the devices do come off the bike a little more often. And then we do sell silicone cases, which they help a little bit. They kind of provide a little bit of a buffer around the unit and as well as above the display. If it takes a blunt shot to a rock really hard, there's not a lot we can do for the display, but we definitely have, we take care of our customers if they call into product support with those issues.
Mm-hmm. True story, Fatty. I was racing a cross-country race once. We were luckily doing laps. I crashed during one of those laps. I got up, started riding away, and about a third of the way around the lap, I noticed my Garmin had come off. And I went back, retraced my steps, and I completed the lap, went all the way back around to my crash site, and found the darn thing. And I still have it to this day. My lovely little Garmin 500 is still with me.
One thing that I have noticed, though, is a lot of people will take the out front mount that comes with the bike computer, and I think was intended for use with your road bike, but then use it with their mountain bike. And it is kind of pleasant to have it that far out front. But for myself, I just could never, ever have that bike computer basically leading my bike, so that if I crash, it is going to be the thing that takes not just all of my force, but all of my weight probably as well if I take an endo. Just something that I have really liked is having the stem mounts, not the ones that attach with the gasket grommet combo onto your stem, but actually attached to the handlebar and then back over the stem. And it kind of just keeps it in a little bit more of a protected place. I'm wondering if that is something that, if you've noticed more computers coming back for repair because they are out front than over the stem.
We certainly have observed that and have understood that, while you're mountain biking, having it out front of the handlebars, definitely expose the unit more so. And we did just release a mountain bike specific mount, and it does allow you to kind of turn that mounting mechanism back over the stem. I know there's some other aftermarket mounts, and then some of our own mounts, you can kind of just put it on backwards and use it that way. I definitely recommend our new mountain bike mount. That should be an accessory on our website.
Cool. Let's do a quick lightning round of some of the tips and tricks that perhaps people don't know that they can do with their bike computer.
Yeah, but when you're talking about battery life, a couple things that you can do to just make sure you're going to get the absolute best battery life is turn the backlight off. If it's daytime, you don't need the backlight on. I think you're going to be able to see the screen okay. And then also, we do have a battery save mode on the newer units that will shut that screen off for you automatically, and then just turn it back on when there's an alert or a prompt or a navigation kind of point of guidance if you have a turn coming up to show you. So I would recommend those two things for battery life.
So another tip that I was hoping you might be able to talk about is the screen lock tip. That is something that I found myself that I am a super fan of, but I don't know if a lot of people are familiar with that.
Yeah, so when you're using any of our touchscreen devices, the newer ones, 1030 for sure, if you are having some issues, like if it's really raining, like sometimes you do get some false touches, potentially. We definitely design for that not to be an issue and don't intend it to be, but if you are running into issues, all you gotta do is press that power button with your timer running, and it's gonna lock the screen. And then if you need to unlock it, just press the power button again, and you'll get a little notification at the top that tells you that.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Hadi, but I am a super profuse sweater as well as a standing climber. And so I tend to drip sweat pretty much nonstop onto the screen of my GPS. And I have changed trying to wipe the sweat off of the thing. I think I've changed my text to Czechoslovakian one time. So,
well, you're good at that language. Come on, it works.
Oh yeah, I speak Czech very fluently.
And I guess something else to mention about that, we do still allow you to swipe left and right, so you can just change screens, but we lock everything else out so you don't change the language, or you change your power field to time or something in the middle of your race.
Yeah. Yep. A very helpful one there. Another tip that I'm going to throw out there for folks who are using the Garmin, and especially the 1030, and folks might notice that both Hadi and I are talking about the Garmin Edge 1030. Both of us have those, and I at least am a huge fan. I know that Hadi is brand new to his, but I have turned off the incident detection and the sharp bend warning for when I am mountain biking, although I leave them on for when I am road biking. Mainly, I've noticed that my Garmin likes to think that I have taken a fall when I do a ledge drop of more than a foot or so. So I have turned that off, and it lets me know on every single hairpin when I'm climbing or descending on a twisty turny single track. So if you're using those new Garmins, you might want to have those off when you are mountain biking on single track.
Kenny, take us into the Garmin of a Garmin engineer, as in you. So you're lining up at Cool Hand Luke or Dirty Kansas. How are your screens set up? Tell us what you've got running on your Garmin and how you're set up.
For the long endurance events, certainly have kind of one page of data that's overall summary, so kind of overall time, overall distance. I'll look at average power, average heart rate for the entire event, maybe total ascent that we've climbed. And I have another page that I mostly sit on with data, and that's kind of my current data, so current power, current heart rate. And some of those types, current speed, grade, those type of metrics. And then I have the map page set up, usually with and I'll spend most of my time either on the map or on that kind of current data screen. But I have the map set up, and I'll have either time to destination or time to my next guidance point on there, so I kind of know what's coming up. And then if you have the course running, we always have a banner at the top that tells you what your next turn is going to be and how far it is to it. So that's kind of nice. You can kind of check out. It's like, oh, I got 5 miles. Okay, here we go. Or longer even. And then I do use the elevation screen as well. In Kansas, it's not quite as necessary because you can usually see the top of the hill that you're climbing. But when I have been over in other areas of the world that you climb, and there's on a climb and there's bends and stuff that you can't see the top, that's really helpful to see that upcoming elevation, and so you can kind of gauge your effort against what you have coming up.
Yeah. Hadi, I'm curious, what are the fields that you like to display?
I keep it pretty simple during races because I don't like taking my hands off the bars and flicking screens around too much. For Leadville, I know the course so well, I don't really have to deal with course or course maps. So if I know the course, I pretty much go based on memory, but I will use a lot of the same stuff Kenny does regarding current data. I want to know my current heart rate, my current speed, not so much average speed. I could care less what I'm averaging because that takes all the way to the end of the race to really figure out. But current speed, heart rate, I know how much climbing is at Leadville, so I keep in a timer. I always have a timer running and then a lap time running too, so I know how far I've been running or how long I've been running in between feed zones. So generally, those four main screens are my biggies.
Yeah, not too different from mine. I always have time as the biggest field that shows there. And that's one of the really nice things about the Garmin setup is you can set up anywhere between 1 and I think 12 or even more fields on the 1030, which has an enormous screen. I mean, it's as big as some phones, which is nice for guys with old eyes like me. But I still just do a few so that I can glance and see the things I care about. I keep time, distance, and speed just front and center at all times. And for Leadville, I always have the altitude one, just because it is a really nice sanity check that, without fail, when I hit 11,500 feet or so, I always feel like my legs have just turned into rubber because of the altitude. And it's nice to be able to take a look at the Garmin and go, oh, well, that's why. It's not that that I've bonked. It's that it's that there's no oxygen. It is really handy, I think, to be able to look at that, and it's sort of, it's a nice explanation of what is going on.
Yeah, I guess to loop back to, I think I recommend the lap summary screen as well. So that's another one I use, and then obviously the lap data fields that Hadi mentioned. I do use those, but I have different setups for different type of racing I'm going to do. So if I'm doing a long endurance race, have stuff set up one way versus like a crit, that's set up a completely different way versus a cyclocross race or something like that. So.
The capability of the modern bike computer, and in particular the Garmin's, is just astounding. There's way more capability than any cyclist is going to use. But certainly, if you are interested in some kind of data, good chance that it's going to have it there. So, Kenny, thanks so much for sharing and some of your insights on this. And come on out to Leadville. Come race it with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, Leadville is definitely on my list for races I need to do at some point.
Very helpful stuff there from Garmin and Kenny. Super smart, obviously loves to ride. There's a lot you can use from that interview, no matter what GPS you're using. But you know what, Hadi? One of my favorite Garmin tips came from you when you and I were talking recently. I was complaining to you that when I sweat and water drips off my nose onto the bike computer, which has the touch screen we were just talking about, it will send me into all kinds of crazy places in the settings. And I am not kidding here. It actually changed the language to Czechoslovakian once. Oh. And I wasn't able to change it back because I couldn't read the English. I had to, I think I found a tip on how I could change the language back to English. But anyway, you had some great advice on how to avoid that in the future. Tell our audience what that was.
Yeah, I kind of stumbled across this having the same problem you did. I was sweating on the computer and it kept changing some of my data screens. I'm like, how do I stop this? So kind of using my previous Garmin knowledge, I said, well, maybe I can lock the screen. So the solution's pretty simple, Fatty. You just toggle the screen lock by tapping the power button, and voila, no more accidental setting changes on your Garmin 1030.
Yeah, which is very nice. And I actually knew that part, but you continued on, and there was a second piece of advice you were telling me about that I did not know.
Oh, yeah. Now I know what you're talking about. Now, even though the screen is locked, you can still... So the screen is locked, and that lock means if you drip sweat on the screen, you're no longer going to get those data field changes. But what Garmin has added with the 1030s is you can still swipe the display, so you can still move to your different screens. It's just that tapping on the screen directly won't change those data fields.
Yeah, swipe works, tap doesn't do anything, and that is exactly what I needed. I thought before that, once the screen was locked, it was basically hands off entirely until you unlock the screen. And it's super helpful to know that I can still swipe between my two favorite views. I just have two data screens set up. I have a super simple view with just time, speed, distance, and my Di2 gearing. And, that on the 1030 with such a big screen, I can see all of those very big and it just a simple glance. And then I've got my more detailed view, which has pretty much every data point under the sun. Honestly, I couldn't even repeat all of them to you, but trust me, if you've ever wondered it, I've got it.
Mm-hmm. Excellent stuff. Thanks again to Kenny Carlson and Garmin for helping us out. No matter how much you love your mountain bike, and I love mine too, once in a while, you got to get out there for some mind-numbing road miles. But guess what, folks? The gang at Envy is spicing up the road by making a new wheel set that comes with an off-road hall pass.
Yeah, it is part of their AR Series 4. AR means all road, which I did not know until very recently. A few years ago, Envy came out with the 4.5 version, which is still a pretty deep wheel set. And customers were saying, hey, Envy, how about something a little shallower? And to that, Envy has responded with the SES 3.4 AR.
Yeah, this wheel set is really for the roadie who has dirt under their fingernails. It's an aero wheel set, but it's optimized for a 28 millimeter tire. In fact, that is the minimum, the minimum width the 3.4 will accept, with a maximum up to 32 mils.
Nice.
It's disc only with a max PSI on the rim of 80. That's pretty low, actually. But again, this is an all-road wheel. It's not intended for the 23 mil, 120 PSI sec. This is meant to do a dual-purpose situation. It's also got that thicker hookless bead than's been seen on their previous road rims, and that is for improved impact protection. Obviously, if it's an all-road wheel, you may take it off-road. You got a chance of banging them tires into a rim, and so that hookless bead is a little thicker for a little more protection. This wheel set really addresses the new style of road riding we're seeing, which is not all about the road. Dash for that city limit sign, then hang a right on the unimproved county road on the Envy 3.4 AR.
Yeah, and I was thinking, if you hit a pothole, there is a better chance that you are not going to bang your rim, or if you do bang your rim, better chance that you're not going to get yourself a pinch flat, which is nice. I don't know about you, but we have some really rugged pavement around here, and wider tires, lower pressure, and those rounder rims going to be very, very nice. You can learn, of course, about all of Envy's wheels and components, many of which are made to sort of as if they were thinking about the Leadville 100, not this particular wheel, but many of them. And you can, all their wheels are strong as can be, and they can handle anything you throw at them in any terrain. And that's why we love them here at the Leadville 100 podcast. Check out Envy at enve.com.
Fatty, once upon a time, the only way you could get into the Leadville 100 was by being lucky. You had to either have been lucky with the lottery or lucky enough to have been doing the race a lot of times.
Yep, those are the ways I've, in fact, always gotten in.
Mm-hmm. Now the lottery and seniority are more the exception than the rule, and even those who do get in through the lottery are giving pretty serious consideration to qualifying events, either to get into the race or to get a better position in one of the corrals.
Yeah, and even for folks who aren't worrying about Leadville qualifiers, it's super uncommon for people who are doing the Leadville 100 to want to be in good shape for just this one big event. You've got other races you want to be good and fit and rested for.
And that's what Coach Jonathan Lee of TrainerRoad is going to be talking with us about for this show. How to be tapered and prepared for not just the Leadville 100, but for the other races on your calendar as well, especially these qualifiers.
Jonathan, welcome back to the Leadville podcast. As always, it's great to have you here.
Thanks, Eldon. We're going to talk about qualifying and tapering and how you time your fitness for those qualifiers but still do well at Leadville. That's a complex one.
Yeah. And I think that it's probably worth prefacing this, that it is not just qualifiers for Leadville. I'm already in for Leadville and I happen to be doing some qualifiers, but like the Crusher and the Tusher is my other major event, and it's really close to Leadville, and I want to be fit for both of them. So I am excited to hear your guidance on how we can sort of weave these important races or qualifying races together.
Yeah, as you've heard on those that are listening to this right now, you've heard about the qualifiers plenty of times from other people, from us on the podcast, that sort of a thing. But there are so many other events, like you said, Eldon. You may have, name whatever event it is, or if you don't even have an official race, you probably want to have a long ride scheduled on a Saturday, a couple months out, something like that, from Leadville, where you kind of test things, so to speak. It doesn't have to be the same course, but you just see, what your body is like. That doesn't mean you have to ride 100 miles. It might be 40 miles. It might be 50 miles. Don't worry about stretching it too far. It's a good opportunity to kind of verify some things. But the complex part comes in when you start to think, okay, well, I kind of need to, if it's a qualifier, for example, I need to do well at that qualifier to improve my corral positioning. But at the same time, I don't want to peak for that event and then be blown out by the time Leadville arrives. So I'm going to talk about two kind of extremes rather than covering every qualifier and how you adjust your training for that. I'll cover kind of two extremes, which the Austin Rattler, which by the time you've heard this podcast, it's long since happened. That happened on April 13th of this year. And then going all the way forward to Tahoe Trail 100, which I guess the Leadville stage race is really in the 9th hour, but the Tahoe Trail 100 feels like it just the same. So those are all different, qualifier options that people could do. And when you look at, Austin Rattler, it's a long way out from Leadville. I mean, you're talking about almost a full 4 months that you'd be sitting out from Leadville at that point. So, with that sort of time, it's kind of interesting. A lot of people will come in and they'll think, I need to start my training super early and I need to peak for Austin Rattler in April. And then what do I do in between then and August? And there are two ways that I would recommend going about this, but I'm going to cover the principles kind of behind it. The fact is, every year, most of us normal humans, unlike a lot of these crazy fast people like Alex Grant that we've had on the podcast and that sort of a thing, most of us normal humans have limits and we can only build so much during a year. And we'll get fatigued, but also it's just a big time commitment and we kind of need that psychological rest from training, right? So if you really wanted to peak for something in April, you should have started all the way back in like November, October, actually, and then built all the way up for that. So you're almost going year round at that point. Even though we ride our bikes year round, I don't usually advocate that somebody train year round. I think it's best to have a little bit of time off. So instead, I'll cover it from the reality, just the normal reality that most of us have, where we start training for Leadville somewhere around the end of January, early February. And in that case, when you look at it, you're getting up to Austin Rattler right out of the base phase and into your build phase, which is actually a really good spot to be to race. You can kind of show up at the Austin Rattler with the fitness that you have. You'll be surprised that you'll do better than you think coming out of a base phase, and you can just carry on. And you basically, with Austin Rattler, you'll just remove your weekend workout and substitute in that race. You might want to skip one workout or make it shorter during the week if you feel excessively tired leading into that. But that would basically be it. And then you'd be able to carry on with your training. You'd basically treat the Austin Rattler like a really big training day. So if you feel excessively fatigued thereafter, maybe skip one of your workouts in the following week or just do an easier workout. But that would basically be it. Where it gets really complex is when you get close to the event, right? So in my case, I'll be doing the Tahoe Trail 100. And I'm hoping to improve my corral positioning because I just got in through the lottery there. So when you look at Tahoe Trail 100, that's July 13th. So that's just a month away from Leadville. Yeah. So when you look at our training plans and where that would put you at, that's in the middle of your specialty phase. So about a month away, you would be right after a recovery week, or at the end of your recovery week, you would be racing Tahoe Trail 100, and then you'd be going into 3 more weeks of specific training before you go to Leadville, or before a rest weekend into Leadville. So here's the complex part. A lot of the time, I think people come into these events that they have leading into it, and they focus so much on the event that they have, like Tahoe Trail 100, that they end up kind of, I guess, psychologically peaking. But you have to remind yourself that physically speaking, you can still continue to fine-tune and hone that fitness and be even faster for Leadville. These races, these qualifiers can be tough, but they're really not that bad. Even the Leadville stage race, it's really not that much because they split it up into 3 days. So looking at this, basically the same thing applies. You'll look at these races like a hard workout, a really hard workout. And you'll basically just have to cut before and cut after and give a little room so that your body can fit in that extra stress in that week. And I guess it goes without saying, but just the same, when you have these races, if you don't feel like you are, or if you feel excessively fatigued on race day, that sort of a thing, be willing to throw away that qualifying race, because remember, the main goal is Leadville. And if it's a bad day, don't put yourself in such a hole on that bad day that it's going to cost you moving forward. So that's kind of the interesting thing. You know, these races, we tend to make kind of a big deal about them and kind of obsess over them. But, you know, Leadville is gigantic, but the qualifiers, you can just slot them into the week and just make a couple adjustments.
Yeah, this is why the Giro Tour double is so difficult. I mean, they're so close together. Both of them are very hard. The Giro is arguably harder at times. And then somebody trying to turn around and race and win the Tour de France, it's just... That's why it's just not been done much recently. Since Pantani, I think, it hasn't been done. So this is exactly why. Now, Jonathan, if we do say Tahoe and we notice we don't have something there, we have a good day, but we go, I'm a little short on endurance or on power-up climbs. Is there anything we can do after that qualifier and try and get in shape or repair or plug that little hole in time for Leadville?
So if you're following the training plans, you're likely not going to make any big improvements in threshold power or something like that, right? You have 4 weeks left. You've already been through the build phase where we really stretched that capacity. Now we're fine-tuning the fitness. But at the same time, if you haven't been following the training plans, you could still see some improvement coming into Leadville if you trained pretty darn hard for the final 3 or 4 weeks going into it. But I usually don't recommend that because you're loading your body full of stress on going into an event where freshness is very important for something like Leadville. One thing I want to say on that, though, is it's really tricky. We show up at this race, and us mountain bikers are absolutely impressive at pacing terribly all the time. And we start these races so hard, and you'll show up at Tahoe Trail 100, and they'll go out of the gate and you'll think, the last time I rode this hard was in a cross-country Olympic race. It was 90 minutes. And is this just the pace that everybody's going to carry? The fact is they're not going to carry that pace the whole race. And if you go into that race and you just, ride as hard as you can, then you blow up, you may find yourself saying, well, I'm just not strong enough. My threshold isn't high enough, or my insert whatever thing isn't enough for Leadville. But really it could just be your pacing plan. So with these races coming into it, like I said, Hadi, you mentioned the Giro Tour double. This is kind of like doing like a spring classic, 2 or 4 weeks ahead of the tour, something like that. So it's not going to be a ton of stress, but this is a fantastic opportunity for you to work on your pacing and to know, and with Leadville especially, it's going to feel counterintuitive to go out and to not just, go as hard as you possibly can in the beginning to stay with that pack. But really, your body's not going to be able to keep that pace going. So if you don't think that you're fast enough at these qualifiers, I would first advise you to analyze how you executed on race day. And if you executed well and you still weren't fast enough, there's some room to be gained. But I'd really just focus on making sure that you are rested enough come race day rather than overworked and gambling that you may get a slight improvement.
Yeah. And I would say that one other way that these qualifiers or other long race days can be of huge value is by paying attention to what went well and what didn't. And I'm not talking about necessarily your fitness, how you did in the climbs, how you did in the flats and so forth, but thinking about, how did my clothes fit? Was I comfortable? Did my chamois rub bad? Did my hands go numb? It's a really good opportunity under race conditions to see how everything else held together, because your comfort, how you are feeling during the Leadville 100 can make a huge difference in how well you do during that day. checking that out during a qualifier or other long race can make is a great learning opportunity.
Yep, absolutely right.
All right, to sum up here, folks, look at these qualifiers. If you're going to one, yes, they're important. We know they're important to you. They're important to your crowd position. You may be trying to get into Leadville, but remember, in the larger context thing of your training plan, that is, you want to treat the qualifiers as one of your hard training days, with the caveat that maybe you get an extra rest day going into the qualifier and an extra rest day coming out. Another thing to keep in mind from Jonathan here, when you're racing a qualifier, this is also a good time not only to train for fitness and physiological response, but for mental things like pacing. Work on your pacing while you're at the qualifier, because that'll translate right over into Leadville once you get there. If you don't have a great qualifier, don't panic. Come out of that qualifier, get back on your training plan. Are there chances for some gains between, say, a Tahoe and Leadville? Yeah, maybe. But be careful, though. Don't get your expectations too high. Next time we get with Jonathan, this is going to be a cool topic. One that both of them are excited about. Me too. Climbing. What is the way you like to climb, especially a long one like Columbine? Next time with Jonathan Lee of TrainerRoad.
That is a super helpful interview for me, Hadi. All of my big races this year are like within 8 weeks of Leadville. There's the Silver Rush, there's Crusher and the Tusher, and then, of course, the Leadville 100. It is being ready for one race after the other. Man, it's my whole season.
Mm-hmm. And as a spectator of this year's Leadville 100, I'm going to be really interested to see how not only you do, but Jonathan Lee does using his own advice. I know he lotteried into the Leadville 100 this year, but man, he's a super fast guy, and I'm sure he'll be looking to move up to that Red Corral at a bare minimum.
Yeah, my money's on the Silver Corral for Jonathan, if not gold.
Whew. Hey, Fatty. Hadi here. Hello, Leadvillers. Out on one of my local trails, working on my walking, not my riding, my walking. Because as you probably heard, the Leadville Trail 100 does involve a fair amount of hike-a-biking. The top of Columbine, Powerline, you're pretty much going to have to walk unless you're at the front of the race, which is why you want to go out and work on your walking. And it's another reason to consider what you'll be wearing, as in shoes. I have a little suggestion here for you from our friends at Shimano. That's the XC5 shoe. That's a shoe I'm wearing right now. It is technically what they call a gravel shoe, but let's be real. This is a cross-country shoe. But the difference between their high-end cross-country shoe and this one is that this shoe has a little flex built into it. It's actually made for some walking as opposed to their high-end XC shoe. In fact, Shimano has a stiffness scale. And on the stiffness scale, this XC5 comes in at a 7. They make it 11, so see what I'm saying there. They make a much stiffer shoe. But this shoe, again, is made for walking. It's a lace-up shoe. It's a good-looking shoe. It's got a Michelin tread on it, so it is ready and willing to walk and hike. The flex is mostly in the toe area, right where your foot flexes as you walk. So it is terrific for getting off the bike and hoofing it a little bit. Now, you might be saying to yourself, Hadi, that's all fine and good, but when I get on the bike, I want a stiff shoe. I want power transfer. Okay, fair enough. Well, that's why I've paired these shoes with Shimano's XTR trail pedal. Now, you've probably heard of the XTR pedal. It's their high-end race pedal, their lightest pedal. What Shimano did is they made an XTR trail version of that pedal, and this pedal has a good amount of platform on it. I would say, it must be 3 inches front to back and a little wider than the normal XTR pedal. So when I clip in, I get a nice platform to push against, and any stiffness I've lost on my shoe, I've regained with a nice platform pedal. In fact, the head of mountain bike at Shimano, this is his setup. I mean, the top guy at mountain bike stuff for Shimano, this is how he rides, the XC5s and the XTR trail pedals. So, why don't you head over to bike.shimano.com, check out all the latest Shimano stuff, including the XC5 shoes and the XTR trail pedals. And while you do that, I'm going to unclip again and get back to my walking.
Last episode of this show, we were talking with our nutrition expert, Roxanne Vogel, about her high altitude tips. And we're super excited to say that as we record this episode, Roxanne has gone to Nepal, climbed Everest, and summited, and is now on her way back down. It seems like she is well on her way to her goal of setting that 2-week door-to-door lightning fast Everest record.
Yeah, Roxanne is clearly the real deal. We look forward to talking with her about this adventure when she gets back. In the meantime, we've got her voice trapped in digital form. We still do have a conversation with Roxanne, recorded, as you'll hear, just before she took off for Everest, talking about what endurance racers should know about supplements.
Roxanne, great to have you back in the Leadville podcast. How's it going?
So good. I am always glad to be here, Fatty.
And you must be getting nervous for your trip to Everest.
I'm getting really excited. I just got my big down onesie and I put it on and I look like a Teletubby. So I'm pretty excited.
All right. We got to have a photo of that in the show notes. Right now, we want to talk about supplements. We want to hear about what you recommend we do take, stuff that you would recommend, not necessarily against, but that you've seen marginal, if any, gains. Just sort of point us in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And gosh, supplements is such a broad term and there's just so many different aspects of the market. But I think focusing on what has the most science behind it and what could potentially help people who are going to train for and ride Leadville would be, our focus, obviously. So number one, I think, honestly, and I've mentioned this before, would be a protein or amino acid supplement, something to support training and recovery, which we already discussed previously. So I won't kind of beat a dead horse there. But I think also, in addition to that, creatine. And it's like dirt cheap, right? Creatine monohydrate is super cheap, but you can get major benefits from it. Even endurance athletes, a lot of times I say creatine and people kind of cringe and they're like, no, that's for the meatheads at the gym. But for endurance athletes, I actually would recommend a low dose protocol. So maybe like 2 to 3 grams a day versus a traditional like 5 grams a day, because this way you're going to avoid some people gain a little bit of water weight when they have a higher dose. But it really does help with muscle recovery, power production, and performance overall. So especially during your training, like your heavy training, it'll help you kind of recover and protect your muscles. And the cool thing is it can even be neuroprotective. So if you were to like get into a crash or something or like bang your head, creatine can really protect your brain. So there's a lot of great things about creatine. It also tends to hydrate the cells better so that you can perform a little better just because you're better hydrated going into a workout. So I really like creatine. But aside from that, beta-alanine, that helps with buffering capacity in the muscle. So taking that, again, this has to be loaded into the muscle, which means you have to take it for a longer time before your event. So 2 to 4 grams a day, divided up. Some people get tingly when they take it. So that's why I say divide it up into smaller doses. And you can get, capsules or something like that that are like 400 to 600 milligrams. But that will help with, kind of buffering some of the acidity so that you can push through some of those climbs and those high power output like sprints and things like that. So beta-alanine would be another one on my list. And we talked about beetroot a little bit in dealing with high altitude and hypoxia and just being more efficient. So I would say that beetroot would be a good one as well. And that one you only need to use probably a couple weeks before your event. But those little shots are usually the right amount. They're about 400 milligrams of beetroot extract concentrate. And last but not least, my personal favorite, caffeine. Because
I'm covered on that one.
Because it helps you have energy, stay focused. It can help you tap into your fat to metabolize that for a fuel source. But it can also make exercise feel easier. And that's probably why I love it so much. I take it in the morning, in my coffee, but it just makes everything feel a little less intense at 6 a.m. when I'm on the stairs for hours endlessly. But keep in mind that people tend to be either a fast metabolizer or a slow metabolizer, and that can really make a big difference in how well caffeine works for you from a performance standpoint. If you're a fast metabolizer and you handle coffee and you can drink it all day, you probably already know this about yourself, but caffeine will generally help you with performance. If you are a slow metabolizer and you tend to get really jittery and kind of whacked out when you have a cup of coffee, people generally know this about themselves, but caffeine can actually hurt your performance. So that is really key to know. So, if you're not entirely sure, you can always get some genetic testing done. It's pretty cheap, but they'll tell you whether you have the genes for a fast or slow caffeine metabolism. So just something to keep in mind.
I have a question about caffeine. As someone who drinks a lot of coffee or espresso, I have heard before that I ought to try sort of detoxing off caffeine before a big race so that it will affect me, I guess, more strongly or better, that I won't have the tolerance built up for it. Is that true? Is there anything to that?
I've seen kind of both sides of that in the research. So there is some research to say if you are a habitual user and you're just kind of accustomed to having high amounts of caffeine all the time, that decreasing it might help you if you do it for 2 or 3 days before an event. It could help like resensitize you to the effects of caffeine. But I've also seen research that says it doesn't really matter from an actual performance measurement standpoint. Like you're still going to perform the same, even if you're not noticing necessarily the effects as heightened as if you were to go off of it. So for me personally, it's not worth trying to withdraw myself in the 2 or 3 days. Like that's just going to make me stressed out before a race.
Cranky
right?
too.
Right. Yeah. We don't need that. So honestly, I would say you don't need to wean yourself off of it before. Yeah.
Roxanne, another popular one in the workout community is glutamine. We see glutamine usually in some of our protein powders, but you can take it on its own as well. What are your thoughts on glutamine?
Yeah, so glutamine is the most abundant amino acid in the body. And it is really important for kind of maintaining your GI tract and immune system. And it can be conditionally essential, which means that you might need to supplement with it if your body is going through some sort of trauma or something like that, or like an infection where glutamine stores are going to get depleted. But generally, people have enough kind of floating around and can regenerate it from other amino acids that you don't need to supplement with it. That being said, I don't think it hurts to supplement with it. And it does feed the cells that line your intestines. And that's always kind of a good thing for your overall immune health and recovery and things like that. Mm-hmm. So I would say I don't see a problem with supplementing with glutamine, but unless you're, really kind of like overtraining or going through some sort of injury or illness state, like you may not need the extra glutamine.
Mm-hmm. And this one is especially for my co-host, essential fatty acids. What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah. So like the omega-3s, is that what you're referring to pretty much?
Mm-hmm. All of them, omega-3, 6, and 9. So yeah, I guess all of them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And again, this is another one where a lot of people can fall short. And if it's essential, it means you can't produce it on your own. So you need to get it through diet or supplementation. And if you're not eating some sort of like fatty fish or something like that a few times a week, you're probably not getting enough. So I would say if you're not a big fish eater, then you would definitely want to consider doing like an omega supplement. And if you're vegan, there are vegan options available. So you can get, it's extracted from algae source. So you basically cut out the middleman, you get rid of the fish and just get it from the algae. But yeah, there are a lot of benefits to having those essential fatty acids in the diet. So every cell in your body, the membrane that contains all of the cell contents is really affected by the types and qualities of fats in your diet. So that's where these essential fatty acids play a huge role, and also with inflammation and things like that. So I do recommend, if you are not getting at least 2 or 3 servings of a fatty fish in your diet a week, a essential fatty acid, so an omega-3 supplement, EPA or DHA.
So how about the basics? Iron, vitamins, things like that. As a kid, I always heard that we need to take those. I don't know if that has been debunked or if that is just assumed at this point. Yeah.
So the problem with the multivitamin approach, and even supplementing with things like iron, is unless you're getting your blood work done pretty regularly and you know what is going on under the hood, so to speak, you could be overdosing on one or more things, especially with those multivitamins. It's like, you could be getting just what you need of one source, but you could be getting way more than you need of another thing that's in there. And you wouldn't even know that because you're not looking at your blood. So I'm kind of hesitant to recommend any sort of multivitamin supplement to people unless I've seen them have a blood workup. And we use with our athletes a service called Inside Tracker. So we look at their different biomarkers and see kind of where we can make adjustments. And a lot of times for endurance athletes, especially, iron is one of them. So no doubt iron, and vitamin D is another. But yeah, without getting some sort of biomarker feedback, I would be cautious to recommend any either multivitamin even or definitely iron, because you can really get into some trouble with iron toxicity if you do too much.
All right, Fatty.
Good to know.
We're going to the vitamin store, and here's what's on my list. Protein, some creatine, beta-alanine. These are all suggestions from Roxanne. Beetroot juice. And, of course, you don't have to go to the vitamin store for this. It's our favorite, caffeine. We'll get our caffeine. Maybe for essential fatty acids and glutamine and multivitamins. You probably could skip those unless your blood work says otherwise. All right, good stuff again from Roxanne. And when we get with her next time, we're going to talk about your race day fueling strategy. Ever wonder what it would be like to have something like rocket fuel in your back pocket to give you that boost you need during a long run or that fast group ride or that attempt up Columbine? Well, enter HVMN. It's actually pronounced human ketone.
Yeah.
Human ketone is the world's first ketone ester, a sports drink shown via scientific data to improve performance and recovery.
Yeah, right. Research has shown a bunch of factors, including increased endurance performance, improved muscle recovery, and enhanced cognitive ability. Ooh, I like that. 18 athletes simulated a Tour de France effort. Half the group was supplemented with a placebo, the other half with human ketones. The group that consumed human ketones after their workout and before bed had 15% recovery, 15% better recovery, I should say. They didn't just recover 15%, and they rode 15% further in a simulated time trial. That is significant.
That's pretty cool. Athletes are using human ketones before and during extended efforts, but the biggest results are being seen in recovery, actually. Obviously, this is huge for athletes training for the Leadville Series events.
Yeah, Hadi and I have gotten a couple of these to try. We haven't tried them yet, but we're looking for the right opportunity. And I think it's fair to say we are pretty intrigued by this. It is mind-blowingly expensive, and it's often completely sold out at the feed. So, maybe get some and try it out if you like, and we will let you know what we find when we try it.
Mm-hmm. And for more conventional energy, food, and supplements, it's worth noting our podcast listeners can get a great price on a pack curated for Leadville racers. Go to thefeed.com/Leadville for our Leadville pack, and be sure to use the code Leadville15 for a 15% discount. You can also use that Leadville15 code for buying any amount of Morton at a 15% discount.
Yep. Hadi and I are both training and racing with Morton, and, we're open to trying new things too. One more time, that is thefeed.com/Leadville, and use the code Leadville15 at checkout.
Okay, time to wrap up Season 2, Episode 13 of the Leadville 100 podcast presented by Floyd's of Leadville. If you like this show, give us a 5-star rating and review over at Apple Podcasts. Also, share it with your other cycling friends and support our sponsors. Let them know you appreciate them making this show possible. Meanwhile, if you have ideas or questions for us, head to the Leadville100podcast.com comment section and get in touch.
Yeah, also follow me on Twitter. I am at Fat Cyclist. You can find Hadi at Michael Houghton. And you can find us both on Facebook, where we are active in the Leadville 100 MTB participants group. If you've got a question, you can DM us, and there's a pretty good chance we'll answer it right here on the show.
Good luck in your training. Thanks, of course, for listening, and we'll see you in the pre-rides and while we record the live Q&A episode podcast in Leadville.